Welcome to episode 3 of In the Hot Seat. What's in the hot seat, you probably ask? Well, every 2 weeks, we'll be engaging with industry experts and or their customers for a, we hope, lively discussion, some debate, some agreement probably, and even some discourse as we try to humanize the digital experience. So all aspects of the customer life cycle are up for grabs. Everything from Salesforce automation to marketing automation, support, customer service, customer success, logistics, supply chain. So that goes pretty far down the road, I think, Kristy.
I think it does.
And I guess we should introduce ourselves. I'm Michael Fauscette.
And I'm Kristy Tupper. And welcome to the third episode in this 5-part series that we've dubbed Experience the Engagement. Yeah. Have you been experiencing it over the past couple?
I am experiencing it right now, I tell you. So I guess just to set the stage a little bit before we talk about our guests and bring them on, we're gonna talk today about who owns the customer experience, and I should probably give a little bit of a boundary around this too, because most of us on the call come from a really specific technology perspective. So it may differ from the business you're in, particularly when you talk about ownership, because certainly, tech companies, SaaS, cloud-based companies, subscription-based companies have invested a lot through the years in a customer success sort of paradigm. And there's also, the product-led growth part of our SaaS business and a growing part in other businesses too, that really does involve something that's completely different when you're really talking about leading with your product instead of leading with marketing or sales. So some difference there, but in general, we're going to look today at software and services.
Absolutely. And it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, around who owns it, because there's so many different camps around who owns that experience, right? Up to and including, what does the customer actually own? So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting concept. And Anthony comes from that services industry. So our guest today will have a pretty good differentiator for us.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about our guest, and then we can get this argument started.
All right. So first off, we have Thomas Wieberneit. Thomas is an internationally renowned analyst and consultant with more than 25 years of proven track record of leadership experience in the CRM and CX industry. Being an experienced practitioner with a unique combination of development, quality management, and consulting experience, he effectively translates business needs into technology solutions, bringing strong value to software vendors and their customers.
Great.
Welcome, Thomas.
Okay, I'm just blushing.
You look very educated with the glasses. I like
that. Yeah, that's a different look for you. I like
it. That's why I just put them on, so that I also can see you.
That's give or take.
That might be overrated.
So our second guest is Anthony Younes. Anthony is a proven sales leader with an impressive 7-year track record of selling into the Fortune 1000. And then adding 9 years of sales ops and enablement experience. He leverages his unique skill set in building both product-led and services-led organizations. And as a practitioner of value-based selling, he's an expert in effectively tying technology solutions back to meaningful, positive business outcomes. So welcome, Anthony.
Welcome, Anthony. Good to have you.
Hey. Thanks for welcoming.
And our third guest is Jody Spencer. So you've seen both Jody and Thomas behind the host seat, but this week we're putting them in the seat. It's good to get a taste of your own medicine, I guess, every now and then. Jody has been a marketing and partnership leader for over 25 years for software and technology organizations focused on customers spanning SMB to global organizations. She is passionate about making sure the customer experience is top of mind when driving marketing efforts to align with the customer journey. Welcome to the seat, Jody.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome, Jody.
Like being on the other side here.
It is fun. It is fun. Although I will say there's less pressure on this side, but that's
You guys will create your own pressure, I think, today. So
wow.
it should be fun to watch.
Yeah,
Where's the mute button for Thomas? That's when
I have that under control. Don't worry.
So when he starts fighting with me, I could just mute. No,
that means he also has a mute button for you, Jody.
Give me a thumbs up or something, Jody,
Okay.
and I'll mute it. All right. Well, so we're going to talk about who owns the customer experience in companies. And again, I said up front that it's from a tech and services perspective, product and services. So why don't we start out with something that's a little twist to that question, and let's make this one a round robin. So we'll start with Jody. How much of the customer's experience does the customer actually own?
Oh, this I love. The customer owns how they feel about the experience. They own 100% of their feelings. But I do believe that the organization that they are interacting with, I feel that marketing owns the lion's share of developing that customer experience for the customer to engage with and walk away with feelings one way or the other.
Good. Anthony, what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's different coming from a software product-led organization to a services-led organization. I'd say from my experience in product-led organizations, the onus on the customer is probably a little bit lower, and typically it's owned by whoever the account owner is at the given time with the customer. I think from a services perspective, there's a lot more that sits on the customer side. We work with a whole different range of folks that have or have not leveraged services in the past, and it's pretty clear when you're working with somebody who's experienced working with services companies, working with partners. They know how to get the most out of the engagements, and typically are a lot easier to keep happy because they're just really good partners. When we run into organizations that are brand new leveraging services, they have different expectations. They're not used to leveraging consulting firms, and they can be a little bit more difficult to keep really happy because the expectations aren't necessarily 100% aligned all the time.
And Thomas, what about you? What do you think? What is the customer's role here in the customer experience?
Well, the customer obviously owns 100% of their own experience because they are the only ones who experience it. Now, it's about how to get there. And that's an engagement process. So there are multiple parts of any company, that engage in a way that the customer gets the experience that the company would like the customer to have. And that's obviously not only marketing, but many other departments of the company itself. And let's see how we get there, what we find.
Well, I will say that you're right. The customer definitely owns their own experience. Unless it's bad, then I will tell you, at least for me, if anybody is around me, they own it too. Trust me.
Good point.
Just saying.
Well, so as a follow-on to that, then does who owns the customer experience actually impact the experience itself? If you put the onus on the customer, does that impact the actual experience versus marketing owns it, sales owns it, the whole company owns it? Jody, what do you think?
So my belief is that every organization in the company has an impact with regard to the customer experience. Every department, right? Anytime a customer interacts with your organization, be it from the acquisition end through the enablement and onboarding, all the way through contracts and financing, every single interaction, conversation that someone has, your representatives within your organization are owning how the message is being communicated, and you're being responsible for how your customer is going to walk away and what they're going to feel about you. So, I think everybody is involved in that experience. I think the challenge and where I probably differ from a lot of opinions, someone does have to own the experience internally at an organization. It cannot be just on the customer, right? Because the organization needs to build that journey for the customer. They need to provide those experiences and engagements along the way. And within an organization, there needs to be somebody held accountable for making sure that that journey is consistent from start to finish.
Anthony, what do you think? Does who owns the experience impact the experience itself?
I think it certainly does. There's a very clear, direct line between who's owning the customer experience within a vendor or organization and what the customer actually experiences on their side. I think when you have a single owner from the vendor side, whether you're a product or services, you run the risk of that person not having the support of the rest of the organization and really having the resources at their fingertips to take care of a customer who might be in trouble. I think the best approach to owning customer experience is it's really, you have the primary owner who's typically the person who's interfacing with the customer's business most frequently. But then I think beneath that, kind of to Jody's point, every single interaction with a customer impacts their customer experience. So you really need to have that share. I want to use a different word than ownership, but I can't find it right now. So shared ownership across everybody who touches the customer. Everybody needs to understand the impact that they individually have on the customer's experience, so they can make sure that it's in line with the direction that the company's going and the experience that we're wanting our customers to have.
Sure. So that leaves you with a really interesting perspective here, Thomas, based on what Jody and Anthony just said, knowing that your perspective is that the customer owns their own experience. So does who owns the customer experience impact that actual experience? And, I'm going to throw out there, how does it impact?
And of course it does, because Jody is absolutely 100% right. There needs to be some accountability for the engagement process. And depending on who owns this process within the company and who defines what the outcome, the expected outcome on the customer side is, defines also the matrix, the KPIs that the company works for and tries to follow. And now the really interesting part is who owns those. And if that is, for example, just to annoy Jody a bit, is a marketing person, that tends to create some bias, as well as giving this onus to a salesperson, create some bias as well, just that it's another one.
So could I jump in and challenge something there? So I agree.
Seat, so.
I agree. If it were marketing to me, marketing has such a bad rap in terms of that name, right? Marketing, people think about in terms of advertising and trade shows, and you're trying to sell, and it has evolved. I mean, when you look at what marketing organizations now take on within a company, when you look at the role of the CMO, that has evolved greatly, especially over the past 10 years, where CMOs are taking more responsibility for understanding the journey and the insights throughout, so we can build different campaigns, right? When you think about the journey, think about the different buckets. You have acquisition campaigns, you have engagement campaigns, enablement campaigns. Those are not all front end of the journey processes, right? That's throughout their entire life cycle. And you look at the marketing budgets. Marketing budgets are increasing to take on different technologies to help with that analytics side, because it's no longer how many people are clicking through my ads and what is my conversion rate on a form, right? We're looking at how many customers are we keeping over their life cycle? How much is the revenue increasing over time? How do we increase customer satisfaction, which is parlaying into CMOs really working with the support teams, with the sales teams, and kind of reporting back on that data and figuring out how to make that journey better for the customer. So, when I look at how our role has evolved as CMOs, we're really taking on more in terms of information that's coming at us and how we have to take that information and distill it out into different departments within organizations. So I think marketing is the department that has, I think, probably a lot of the insights from different areas. We're no longer just, again, that front end advertising. How is your lead generation effort working? We've evolved so far beyond that.
Well, one thing that we don't really have represented here very well, I think, in our panel. No offense to the panel, is customer success. And so I'm curious, how do you we talk about kind of owning the experience, but a lot of companies really talk about owning the account, and I think there's probably some disagreement in this group, but we'll see about that. But I'm just curious, how does it factor in sales, customer success? And I mean, obviously, SaaS, cloud, subscription businesses have gone heavy in investment into the relationship and into customer success. So how does that, Anthony, you're in sales side of the business, so this probably is a good sort of perspective to you. But how does that work? I mean, who's the account owner, and how does that play if sales and customer success?
Sure. Thanks. So I'll speak first to what I've seen in my perspective on product-led, software-led companies. In those cases, what I've seen that works the best, and this is my own personal belief too, is the largest customers, the most strategic customers, typically do best when there's consistency pre-sales and post-sales. So oftentimes for large strategic customers, for your company, the salesperson is going to stay on there as the account owner. They know the buyers, they have the relationships, they've been on all the calls since day one. There's nobody else on the team that knows the account and what they're looking to drive to better than the salesperson. So keeping them involved post-sale for expansions, renewals, et cetera, for strategic accounts, I think is the best place for it. Then, of course, the question is, well, what about the rest of the accounts that are not necessarily in the top X percent? From the product side, we see CS, customer success, right? Own those accounts. And I think a very real difference that we see in terms of how those accounts are handled are CS is motivated much differently than sales. Sales is always looking for bigger dollars, expansions, bigger renewals. They're not necessarily looking to keep the account flat. Whereas customer success is a little bit different. They're not traditionally salespeople. They care about getting the renewals. They care about their customers being successful. But from a day-to-day engagement is typically it's not going to be as frequent as with the salespeople, because CS has a lot more accounts. It'd be impossible. So slightly different motivations there. And then from a services company, typically service companies don't have customer success. We have project managers, and project managers is probably should come up with a different term, because they do so much work and they're so critical to a customer's experience. As soon as we kick off a project, as soon as that contract is signed, the PM is there onboarding people, working with kickoff dates, making sure that the customer is hitting their goals. On the services side, post-sale, I think the PMs are either the project manager or engagement manager are the ones that own it.
Jody, Thomas, what do you guys think?
I think marketing should own it, but that's not.
I would have never expected you to say that, Jody.
I can't imagine. CMO, CEO.
I do agree, right? I do agree with what Anthony said in terms of software and product being a little bit of a different beast. But I still believe that at the heart of who's keeping that consistent narrative throughout the organization, who's helping to direct that narrative and understand, okay, what are the numbers saying? Where are things potentially going awry? Where are we really strong in some areas? And how can we leverage, going back to a campaign mentality, how can we leverage this data to make that customer's experience more positive, to increase value over time, to make them an advocate of our organization? Even, with the services side, you rely on advocacy, right? Word of mouth, making sure customers are happy, that they know you're a great organization to work with. And again, making sure that that narrative is consistent when someone begins working with you from the start all the way to the finish. Marketing is the department that's helping to drive, what are those communications? How are we talking about things? Is it aligning with the organization's goals and making sure that everything is just consistent so that customers walking away and saying, yep, that's a company I can get behind that brand.
Well, one sort of twist to this. So we've been talking a lot in this situation about direct, right? But what about a company that's in a channel model, an indirect model? I mean, how does that change account ownership and how you interact both with the partner and with the account? And I'll leave that up to anybody who wants to take that one. It looked like Thomas was jumping on that one.
I'm going to close my lips until someone else speaks, and then I'll jump in.
I just wanted to push it to Anthony.
That's fine. Yeah.
No, seriously, so what Anthony said is that the project manager is responsible and accountable. Now, for the individual customer, that may be right for the engagement as such. But then there are different types of engagements, there are different stages of engagements, even in a services company, and then there are companies that are not services companies. So while I think for a service company, the project manager is a good initial start, there may be different companies, customers that have similar problems. And at that point in time, there needs to be a practice in place that makes sure, a process in place that makes sure that these issue that a customer has, that the project manager sees, gets recognized across the own organization. And that gets or even worse when we have a partner infrastructure in place. So it can't only be the project manager as such as well. So there I'm actually closer to Jody. It needs a central instance.
Wait, are we
as long as it's
recording
not
this?
marketing?
Did Thomas say he
No,
agrees
no,
with
no.
me? Hold on.
Oh, that can't be. So Jody, make him disagree.
Well, I can speak to kind of both
Yeah.
questions. So I'll start with the second with Thomas. So you're 100% right. There needs to be some sort of central place for leadership to become aware of trends across accounts and across engagements. And one of the things that we do is at the end of every engagement, we have internal retros. We bring in the delivery team, the project team, sales, finance, everybody who touched the engagement, and we do a full kind of retrospective analysis of how the engagement went. And leadership is involved in all of those as well. And that's really the way that we go about bubbling those things up, making sure that the leadership team is able to identify trends, right? Has the information to identify it. Is it perfect? No. Is there more systematic ways we could probably do it? Yes. But that's the way that we're solving the problem today. And then back to the partner question, I think, Michael, you may have been asking this from the other side in terms of companies that are using partners to sell their own solution. We're kind of sitting on the other side. We have partners that are bringing us into opportunities and in order to service their customers and help them do what they're trying to do, our partners. In those cases, and this is true of the services business that I'm in now, we really have two customers, and it's the ServiceNow account team, or ServiceNow or Datadog are two partners. It's their account teams, their salespeople, and their customers, right? And it's unique because we really need to make sure that both are happy all the time. If we aren't delivering great services work to our customers, then our partners aren't going to bring us in anymore. And on the flip side, if we're not great partners to the sales teams and help them drive to the end goals that they're driving to, then they're not going to bring us in either, regardless of the work that we do for the customers. So kind of a unique perspective to customers that are very much equally important to RapDev, and we have to treat them very differently.
I would add on from a partnership perspective, I agree with you, Anthony. The partner is as important as the end user customer for any organization, because they are another extension, right? They're the folks who are out representing your technology, and it's as important for us to treat them as such, and we need to keep them happy. I would say, however, partnerships is a very broad term. So when we look at that, not all partners are created equal. So depending on, and that's where it's going to get a little, there's going to be some deviation in how partners work with organizations. You're going to have some that are more strategic, some that may be more consultative and with a one-on-one relationship and very involved with customers. And then you might have partners who are more marketplace oriented, cross-selling and doing some different promotions back and forth, but really not too much interaction with the customers. And I would say that on the front end of those two buckets of partners that we talked about initially, those individuals are the folks who need to, again, align with you on your brand and your messaging when they're representing you out to the customer. But just as importantly, we need to treat those partners just as high as we do with our customers, and make sure that the partner themselves are happy as well. But again, going back to the messaging and the narrative and getting everything out to the customer base, we need to make sure that they're on point with what we're promoting, so that message is the same consistently across all channels, whether it's coming from us directly or coming from a strategic or a consultative partner.
That partner perspective is bringing an interesting twist into this. We talked about before who's accountable for measuring that customer success. I'm also curious, who's accountable for measuring the partner success, not just the customers, but the partners as well. Jody, do you want to continue with that train of thought?
So I'm in a very unique position at my company in that not only do I manage the marketing side of the organization, but I also manage our partners and our alliances. So I'm in a unique position to be able to see both sides. Obviously, not all companies have that set up, and there's generally someone who's handling, the alliances and the partnerships. I think that when we talk about the success of, right, when you break down success and you think about the positive outcomes, we're going to have positive outcomes for the partnership relationships, and that's whomever is handling those channels. But then back to who owns the actual customer experience. If we think about our partner with regard to a customer engagement, who's more consultation side, apologize, I can't speak today. They are really the person who's going to be interacting more likely they'll be interacting and holding that customer relationship than us as the software technology provider. So we need to make sure that they're keeping our customer jointly happy as well. And I think you're right, it adds another level of complexity, because you have to make sure that there's a lot of different players receiving a positive experience from you.
Right. Yeah, that would add an interesting twist to the Esteban conversation, right? Not only is there CX and EX, but what about PX?
There's a lot of X going on. Just throw a letter in front of X.
So I'm curious, in that conversation, talking about measurement, like what metrics do you look at? I mean, what do you think is the most relevant thing to track, and what do you, both individually, what do you guys do, and then what would you do if it's a partner, et cetera? Curious. Kristy, who were into that? Oh, Jody, there we go. Jody, you got it.
You're going with me again? Okay.
Well,
Sorry,
I mean, you were talking about it already.
So from a measurement perspective, for organization, it's all about who is going to stay sticky, who is going to renew their contracts with you. It gets really interesting when you look at both the services, and Anthony, you'll be able to definitely provide more insight than I can on the services side, and on the technology side. It depends on the depth of that technology as to how sticky customers become with your organizations, right? And I think some organizations have to really pay attention. Just because you are a larger technology buy and you are within an organization, I think some of the time people lose sight of the fact that you're always going to be in that organization because perhaps it's really difficult to rip and replace and it's this cumbersome effort. But I believe that software today has evolved so much that the stickiness factor is becoming a little less sticky, and businesses and consumers are able to change out technologies a little bit easier. So I think paying attention to customers who are renewing, customers who are increasing licensing value, customers who are adding on new features. And that's really, when you know that you have a satisfied customers, when you start seeing those increases between the renewals, the additional licenses, and the additional features.
Yeah. Jody, we can definitely agree on something, because we can agree on that, because that's exactly how we are measured as a partner to ServiceNow and Datadog. It's all about influencing growth, right? So where can you tie us to net new licensing spend? Where are we influencing year over year, month over month growth in spend? That's exactly how we're measured, right? What are we contributing to the business? Product ads is another one as well.
Well, let's give a little preview to an upcoming Josh Greenbaum discussion. What you put here are proxy metrics. These metrics are company-centric and not customer-centric. Your growth. You grow perhaps because the customer is happy, but perhaps also because the customer is captive. So from a consulting point of view, and there's bunches of implementation projects, what is defining the customer's success is actually the outcome of the implementation project in a B2B business. Means we need to do something that is actually often forgotten, is measure business KPIs of the customers and see how they change after we implemented a project. So a software project. In a B2B business, this apparently is quite different. I mean, what is the success I have from eating a can of beans as part of my chili? This is probably in terms of nutrition, or also in terms of taste, which is hard to taste or hard to measure. Yeah? And different for everybody else. Yes. Similar customer success in terms of get a new phone. What is my success there? It's probably not buying a new one. That is your success, not mine.
So that's an interesting spin. And I also think it's interesting that you guys are addressing the end of the cycle versus where you can measure customer experience before the end of the cycle. So renewals happen because there's engagement. Value add sales happen because there's been adoption, right? So just very interesting perspectives.
Well, and I think part of that is because in the front end, right, the metrics, to me, those metrics at the front end are talking obviously about the acquisition, right, and the education and awareness side, right? Are we doing a good job of making our story heard, where customers could see value with our product or service, be it B2B or B2C? What does that form conversion look like? What does that, and again, forms are dead these days. So what does that trial conversion look like, or how the pipeline that we're building up front? But to me, if I have a great lead conversion on the front end, but I'm not getting customers on the back end who actually sign on the dotted line, then that to me is right. That requires a little bit more investigation. What's going on if we bring all of these folks into the pipeline? Where are things falling apart, and how do we fix that? So when we say measuring the success, really that front end pipeline is going, those numbers are going to matter at some level, but at the end of the day, those numbers need to be able to convert into what does that bottom line look like on December 31st of that calendar year, right? So that to me is the most important number. Are we staying flat? Are we increasing? And then when you drill that down to the number, that's another thing you have to look at, right? What if you're increasing, but you're increasing only from your current customer base? What does that tell you about the net new, right? And how do you have to change your tactics to bring in more net new logos? So there's a lot of different variables, I think, that you have to look at when you're looking at growth and the bottom line, and making sure you understand where it's coming from, because it's great to keep a customer and it's great to expand within a customer. We all know it's more cost effective to land and expand than a net new logo, but we have to be very conscious of that number and that growth and try and figure out, how do you balance the two?
I mean, how does that play against net dollar retention, which is sort of the metric buzzword of the year, I guess? I mean, because if you're just doing net dollar retention, it doesn't matter where the dollar comes from, right? As long as you're retaining that, and you can grow by adding customers, you can retain by adding customers. You could just by add seats, right? So how does that play into it?
From my perspective, I think it depends very much on kind of where you're at as an organization, and where what your goals are over the next 1 to 3 years. If you're a very mature, older organization with a large customer base, it may make sense to focus all your efforts on your top customers and take it from there. So then you're looking at current customer growth. If you're a newer company, then your focus more likely is going to be on land grabbing, right? You're trying to grab as many net new logos as possible, and still grow the ones that you have. So you're looking at more of a mix there. But in my experience, it's very dependent on the organization that you're in, the maturity of the organization and the market, and what their short-term goals are, short to medium term.
And I'm going to wrap that back to the overarching kind of message of this discussion, right? It all comes back to experience. The experience that customer is going to walk away with, and how they're going to think about your brand. Because if they don't have a positive experience, if you didn't make it easy for them to interact with you and help to make their journey, quick, easy, satisfactory, you're not going to get that customer advocacy. That word of mouth is the best advertising that you could possibly get. It doesn't matter how many ads you run, but if you have a true review, or someone who's talking at the dinner table with their colleagues and they're mentioning this product that they really like, or this consulting agency that they worked with that was great. I mean, word of mouth is great. So it's all about that experience.
You can also drive it the other way too. There's plenty of organizations that are looking to fire customers, right? Get rid of customers that are a drag on the business, and that the organization is shifting focus away from. You can drive a lot of that through consciously changing the experience that those customers are getting, to have them opt out. I've seen that too.
That's a great point, Anthony. We didn't even talk about that. I mean, there are some folks that you definitely want to change that narrative. Yes.
For sure.
There's another point that we didn't talk about. The messaging is great to have, but if the promise is not there, or the result is not there, well, the way to the non-result can be as pleasurable as can be. I'm still not happy. So this is something that we shouldn't forget about as well.
So I think it's an interesting concept of changing the experience to the point where somebody wants to leave the organization. Can you change that experience for just one customer to make them not want to renew their contract while keeping the experience good for everybody else? I mean, I'm kind of thinking, Thomas, from the customer owns their own experience perspective, that kind of gets interesting. Well, anybody can take that one.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I have to jump in for a sec, though, because I think that is really interesting. You're right. And certainly if you want to fire a customer, you can make the experience bad enough that you don't have to do it themselves. But I think that is an interesting twist, Kristy, because certainly you can't impact a broader set of customer, right? So it's a very specific thing, and and it could certainly backfire really easily in the environment we're in today. So yeah, that's interesting.
And Sven had a really good question. Can we put that back up there? When does a customer have a positive experience? When we deliver the value, when the company is delivering the value? I'll let any one of you take that one.
Is that a who question or a what question? That's interesting.
That's at least 3 questions. But
Yes, it is.
That's true too.
let me start with it. The customer had a positive experience if at least at minimum the expected outcome is achieved, and that in an easy as possible way for the customer. So when do you deliver value? Well, when the customer thinks that the price in terms of effort and money and emotions that they paid is worth the result, then you delivered value. If who does it? Well, it's team effort.
And
Go ahead, Anthony. I'm going to jump in after you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the only twist that I would say to what Thomas said is think about it don't think about it from the perspective of at the end of an engagement or of a project, whatever. It's really every step of the way. So the very first interaction with the customer, what are they looking to get out of that initial interaction? And did we make that a positive experience? Then you keep going down the sales cycle all the way through to the end and post-sale. It's like every single step of the way, you need to be delivering that to the customer, making it easy to do business and providing value that they're looking for. Then you're delivering a really great customer experience. It's not a point in time thing. It's a continuous journey.
I'm going to throw in one little caveat to that, because I don't necessarily, I believe that the customer experience could still be a positive one, even if they don't receive their expected outcome. Thomas, think about where you engage with an organization because you have a gripe with someone, and you go in and you start raising the issue internally. And now my expectation as the customer is my issue is going to be resolved. I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to get a discount. I'm going to get, additional months. I'm going to get something. But as the organization, let's say they can't do what the customer wants as that expected outcome, but what they can do is still provide a remediated response. They could mitigate the issue. They could still come out with a positive experience overall, even though the customer is not necessarily walking away with what they came into the conversation believing that they were going to get out of the discussion. So I think a positive experience is still something that can be achieved, even if their expected outcome is not the end result. And I think that's something that organizations do need to focus on.
And I think that would make a good topic for another episode at some point too.
I think you're right, because unfortunately, I think we're about at time. But do you ever walk away wanting more? Like your dinner just wasn't big enough and you'd love to have more? I mean, I feel like we kind of scratched the surface of a lot of this, but we probably need dessert.
I think we're going to go from a 3-part series to like a 5-part series, 6-part series, the X series.
Some da capos.
Well, thank you so much, guys. That's all the time we have today. But Anthony, Thomas, Jody, you guys survived the hot seat. And I would just say to everybody who's listening and watching, if you think you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, let us know. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. We'd love to put you in Anthony's position. We might not pair you up with 2 of our own at that point, and you get the whole show to yourself. You never know.
No hired assassins for that one.
That's right. All right, guys, that's your In the Hot Seat episode for today. Thanks so much for being with us this week. I'm Kristy Tupper.
And I'm Michael Fauscette. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, and different perspectives as we put someone different in the hot seat.
Thank you guys
so
for
much.
the opportunity.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for having us.
Thank
Bye.
you.